Providing a survey, which we don't want to have happen on Kiawah. Kevin will be joining us here shortly. We're having a couple technical problems, but they'll be online. Of course, you have the board of directors here. We thank you for taking the time to spend with the rules and regs. It's not an exciting read, but we appreciate your thoughtfulness in taking the time to read it and review it. We have made an initial pass on revisions between the January 6th document that was presented at the board meeting and today. We have extended the comment session for this. That was extended this morning to February 3rd. So we can continue to receive member comments for the next week. And today we're here to listen. We want to hear your feedback on the rules and regs so that we can produce a strong and balanced document for the community. If you would, when you have comments to make, if you come to the podium, where we can pick you up on a mic. And if you know what section you're referencing, that would be really helpful for those of us taking notes to follow along with you and pick up your changes that you're suggesting. Those are my opening comments, sir.
So just briefly, the board did receive written comments from members of the community, which we appreciate and have studied carefully. In addition to the comment period that Shannon referenced, I think it is our plan to formally review / approve these rewrite of the rules and regulations at the board meeting on February 10th.
If we're to a final document, yes, it is on the board's tentative agenda.
And I guess the only other thing I would say is that I think the objective of this meeting is to listen and get additional comments from the community and feedback and ideas, but not to make decisions.
You want to start?
Do you want to start?
I want to.
No,
I'm going to get my coffee in a minute either.
should have gotten you a chair.
No, I'm good. No, you know.
And Kevin has joined us.
I usually don't need a microphone anyway, but we're good. So let me start at Paul's last comment, which Shannon, which is the intent, if it's possible, to approve these by the February 10th meeting. That causes a concern because some of the meat of the rules and regulations is the ability to fine. And you don't have that ability right now on your governing documents, and you won't have it as of February 10th because you won't yet know the results of the amendment that's proposed for the covenants. So I think you're putting a cart and horse in the wrong order. You don't currently have the ability to fine. That's been admitted by KICA in a number of its posts online. And so I would wait, frankly, to pass any rules and regulations that have a fine component in them until you know the result of the amendment, which isn't going to be by February 10th. So that's my first. I also just want to kind of lay out and it'll become clear, I think, why my concern. The hierarchy of authority, as I understand it, is federal law, state law, local law, KICA covenants, KICA bylaws, KICA rules and regulations. And the reason this is important is, for example, on page 5, 3C, which is safety and privacy. And this is no carrying weapons. I'm all for that. But I think it violates state. In March of 2024, the state enacted a concealed carry permit law, which permits people to carry a gun with or without permission, concealed or open, unless there's a very large posting on the property that's not permitted. Now, this was drafted originally. We saw it earlier in January as saying where posted. They can't carry a gun where posted. That would actually comply with the statute. Taking the where posted language out actually creates a conflict with the state statute. There's also something called the Second Amendment of the United States Constitution, which I think this might run afoul of. So while I applaud the effort to include guns on the island, I just don't think you actually do it. And I'm not really in favor of enacting rules that you can't enforce, but maybe you guys are. Now, I've got some bits, so let me
So sorry, your recommendation is what?
just either put where language back where posted, which would comport with, when we get the statute section.
It's okay.
I believe you.
That was the intent, by the way, when we discussed it as a board, it was gonna be on our buildings properly posted. I don't know why that would.
Because that would comply with the state concealed carry permit law that was enacted last year. Okay.
Say at the gate also.
Well, I think the gate needs, I think the gate windows and probably Leah needs to put on the rotating sign something as well. There is a definition in the statute how big the posting has to be.
Correct.
Okay, so I would put that language back in. Okay, my smaller points. I would call this a handbook of rules and regulations on the front, and the reason is on page 2 of the definitions, above the definitions themselves in the first paragraph, you say words and phrases when you in this meaning, in addition to terms elsewhere defined in this meaning. I think why not?
Did we just change it to document instead of handbook?
Well, whatever, I want a consistency.
Yeah.
Whichever way you choose to fix that, I think they should be reflected.
Well, Shannon, in my document, in my copy, it uses the term document.
It does in places, but she's correct in the opening paragraph under section 1, it does still use the old terminology of handbook.
Okay.
So we can clean that up.
So there's probably a search and replace.
Yeah.
That you something that you could just work through that.
Yep.
Okay, now I'm going to page 4, and this was a question I had last time, I forgot to ask it, under 2B, parking. Beach access parking is provided at, and there are 4 listed places. And to me, that means it's like a KICA provides it at those places. Does KICA really provide it at the Ocean Sports Clubhouse?
Yes.
Really?
Yes, ma'am.
We have oh, we have a license agreement or something? Okay, all right. So confusing.
Yes.
Okay. Now, page 5. And this one I have a number of issues on, and it's pretty much related to parking. I point out again that you say parking is not permitted in A, on-road shoulders and on-road rights. The road right of way includes the road.
Yeah, we cleaned that up in another area from your last comments.
Yeah.
But we've missed it there. So
Okay.
fair comment.
Then going to C, on roads where leisure trail access or visibility is impaired. Now, I will tell you, I got a lot of that on my side. Would verify this because of the way the road jogs, and I'm not quite sure, again, who I report that to. There's 3 or 4 people who can grant an exception to this, but who do I really contact if I've got an impairment on the road and I can't get by a truck? Then E, on roads where solid yellow lines or medians are located. Flyway has medians. Blue Heron Pond Road has medians on my side. I think Clay Hall has medians, Glen Abbey has medians. I mean, do you really need to say on all roads where there's any median, you
No.
can't park, or do you need to say within 25 feet of the median? Or, so I'm asking you to clarify, because I'm fine, you don't want people parking in my side.
Solid yellow lines or medians are located. It's not,
On roads is the modified term. On roads where medians are located. You got long roads where there's a little median. That's what I'm saying.
clarification, only in the areas of median.
And I said, okay, 20 feet, 25 feet of the median, I don't know, there's probably a state, frankly, there's probably a state statute that tells you for safety, highway safety, what it is.
And the other thing is, probably 1% of the people on the island know that that yellow line came up. Maybe one.
If I can just note for a second, I've got one of my comments. Many of the yellow lines are somewhat intermittent because they're faded and worn off, and I think if we're gonna have this as an enforceable rule, then I know we have a rule about policy will be don't repaint lines until we repave them. But we may want to just go out and get the yellow lines to be done where they're supposed to. Because you got that flyway that comes and goes, comes and goes. And I think that was the intent.
So that needs to be, clarified. H, on unpaved or lawn areas of property. We now have a number of residents who have permeable surfaces on their driveway or as their driveway. They're not paved, they're unpaved. Parking is not permitted on unpaved areas of property. I don't think that's what you intend. I think you mean you can't put a car on blocks in the middle of your frame. Or you can't park in the middle of your frame.
You can park in the middle of your front.
But unpaved used in that context creates,
So it's almost from driveways, designated parking areas or lawn areas. You need to be in a designated parking area.
right, whether it's paved, permeable, colorant, whatever.
Correct.
Yeah, so that needs to be cleaned up. And again, on I, there is this catch-all where exceptions can be granted for all of these parking restrictions, but there are 4 people who can grant them. And to me, that just creates, an administrative nightmare. Plus, we're gonna keep some kind of database where you grant it, so that if I call and say, hey, there's a guy parked here, and I have to inquire whether an exception or restriction was limited or lifted, how am I gonna know? Who am I gonna? So I think that needs a little bit more clarity. I don't think you want something that's vague enough that I don't know how to enforce it, and neither do you. Guess is my point. Going down prohibited items. Low speed vehicles is 1A. An LSV owned by a members, that's just the type. Take the other. You're correct. Okay. Now, 3A4, I have a concern about. Personal mobility devices, which are defined in the definitions, are not permitted to be used on Kiawah Road or leisure trails. If we have a resident or member who has a motorized wheelchair, you are precluding them from driving on leisure trails. I have a concern.
Phil and I talked about that right before this meeting, that we were trying to come up with what is this term to describe this group of vehicles. And we thought maybe we put in the definition an exception for whether it's wheelchairs, etc., for handicapped individuals.
Yeah.
Can you think of a different way?
I don't know, because you say that personal mobility devices for individual transportation over short distances that includes motorized or electric devices. Yeah, that would include a motorized wheelchair, but I don't think that's what we really intend to include.
No.
So, I guess you need an exception in that.
Mm-hmm. We can do that again.
Yeah. Okay, I already went through 3C1. Four, so we're now on page 6.
Yeah.
This continues to be my concern about the general restrictions. The following activities are prohibited on the island and enforced by other people, and there are only 4. Now, there are lots of laws and crimes that are enforced by county, state, or federal law enforcement agencies, and listing those 4, to me, kind of implicit in that is everything else is allowed, and you don't want to say that, and you don't mean to say that. So I think you may just say all activities prohibited by federal, state, county, or town law are prohibited, including but not limited to, if you really want the litany of saints. If you really want those 4 things identified as your particular focus, but I don't want to exclude any. That's my language issue there.
Read your sentence again, Laura.
Sure.
Things.
All activities prohibited by the federal, state, county, or town law or ordinance are prohibited. Including but not limited to, and then you can do your litany if that goes forward for you.
Got it?
So. Then you go down to 1, 2, 3, and 4, the litany. And I would just say vandalism, public drunkenness, or boisterous behavior. Illegal drug consumption or possession. In other words, leave out, you've already said they're right, you've already said they're so I would eliminate the back parts.
Oh,
Do you know what I'm saying?
I'm all for it.
On all four, yeah.
Got it?
Okay, okay, and again, so the personal mobility device is also mentioned on 7, on B4. Specifying they can't be used on leisure trails, that would also need the exception language for a motorized wheelchair. Or, I don't know what the right word is, but whatever that is.
Wheelchair, then they got a little other.
It could be a cart, it could be a motorized. I don't know what the right language is for that exception, but I think it needs to be added there
We'll work on it.
too. Okay, I'm moving over to page 8, G. This is my issue. No fishing from the bridges, please. Okay, I said that again, I'm done with that.
Okay, so Maura. I'm aware that people fish from the bridges. I'm also aware that we have been warned against creating HOA hell. And overruling and over mandating. Now, like you, I live in the preserve and people fish from the bridge. It doesn't bother. So
It has nothing to
it's
do.
not unsafe.
Oh,
It is not, I've seen situations where people, Joe is on one side of the bridge and Harry is on the other side of the bridge. And they're visible and trucks come by and I go by, it's not unsafe. So in a highly theoretical situation, could it be dangerous? Yes. Do we want to say no fishing off bridges? I mean, what are we trying to do?
One of the reasons for that, and they passed on Rhode Island on the same thing, is you got a kid or whatever it is, they're not paying attention, they want to pass, they gotta wait at the end, go right through a windshield. If they passed on Rhode Island, because pilgrims on a bridge, that exact thing, it was pretty high up, she got hit in the windshield and swerved off. the
And
bridge.
a person could fall off the bridge and drown.
Well, it's just that the other place where the fishing is a real problem is when you're heading towards Osprey with the bike trail on the side.
with a marsh.
People, I mean, I've seen people out there, they park their bike, they got their fishing gear out there, they got, and you can't get by them if you're riding, so.
Correct. You can't get by and someone's heading towards you, and what happens on the bridge in the preserve, Paul, when you're coming from either one of our homes, you can see better the visibility coming into the preserve. When you turn left and you have to then go around the curve, you are right on the fisherman. And Paul, if you don't think it's a problem, I get it. It's KICA property. If you don't care, I'm trying to give you a protection for KICA property, that's fine. You guys can vote not to do it.
So
But it's a danger.
may I ask a question? I didn't realize until David said this, that some states have laws. Do we know, do either of you know? You agree, but I don't know.
The town outlawed it on their bridge.
The town outlawed it on their bridge.
Right.
You know, the state law.
I
I haven't looked it up.
I yield.
No, you can just respectfully disagree.
I've done that already.
I know, there's all types of bridges.
There's all types of bridges. There's a bridge on the causeway coming in. That's a big bridge. Lots of traffic, dangerous situation. But then there's the bridge and the preserve, and that's like the total opposite end of the spectrum. So I guess I did see both sides.
Yeah, again. I guess you'd have to show me like a really big danger, because this is why people come to Kiawah, they come to Kiawah to fish, go to the beach, and I just don't. find it a big
There's
deal.
plenty of places to fish other than on that little bridge.
I know, but again, going to the rule hell, we're trying to avoid is a rule against everything.
I just want to jump in.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Oh, yeah, I was just gonna jump in with Dwight and Paul. I think there are so many risks on the island, from alligators to falling off the fishing bridges. We can't, you can't warn against everything, and you can't prevent everything, especially for people who come to enjoy the outdoors.
One of the other things about,
Can I-
You have to come up
Go
here for them to hear.
What's good up here, Bill?
You don't want me sitting. There's a couple related items. First of all, yeah, all bridges aren't the same. You know, I walk across certain bridges like Valley of Oaks Bridge or the one by the Osprey Golf Course, but you have golf carts going by. People are standing there with their fishing poles on both sides and kids are casting, and it is dangerous. But once you say, and there are places where you say no fishing from bridge, you sort of own that liability. If you set a stage where some bridges you can't fish on, some you can't, and somebody gets hurt on ones where you don't have signage, then they're gonna come blame somebody if somebody really wants to go after a deep pocket. I just think there are certain ones that are narrow and are just not appropriate. I'm surprised that one in particular, the first on Bufflehead, where the first golf course crossing is, that is packed with people, and the golf carts, and it's just not conducive. And ironically, there's actually a little dock area right there where you can. So I just think folks need to look carefully at the different bridges and say yes for that. But that's
So
just.
that in this, in the rules and regulations, we just drop it all together or really recommend it?
I think my recommendation is that we go out and we look at the bridges. And decide which ones.
On bridge amendment.
no, just say we oppose it, don't fish above bridge.
Exactly, and then we need to go out and better post where you're allowed and not allowed.
That's one of the other things about bridges. Bridges are a travel lane from edge to edge.
Right.
There's no sidewalk, there's no grass. So, you basically, there's a fisherman here taking 4 or 5 feet away from the travel lane. I mean, it's just because you want to get up by. I don't see the need to fish from the bridges. Because it's travel lane all the way across. Just before you get to the bridge or after the bridge is probably grass and probably some sidewalk area where you can fish from. The bridge is not very wide.
Well, some of them are better than others, but I just think it's an assessment that has to be made, and then you'll put signs, yes, no. The same thing with bikes on the sidewalks going to the beach. They have a little sign that's you can't even read anymore, and that's the problem in itself.
10. Number 10, special events.
Good. Thank you.
Page 10, number 10.
Perfect.
And this is, I'm gonna point it out before. Weddings, large parties, open houses, and other large events that will result in unusual traffic or parking issues shall be considered a special event. I have no idea what you mean by large. I have no idea what you mean by unusual, but I think any vagueness means it's basically gonna be unenforceable, whatever you want to do about it. So. And then I get to the enforcement and penalty section, which again, you can't do yet.
So just before we leave number 10, so
Yeah.
what is your recommendation again?
Well, tell me, I need to back up and answer the question, what are you trying to? What are you trying to regulate?
Special events that result in unusual traffic or parking issues.
Right, what's that? What's an unusual event? What's an unusual parking issue?
So think of, house tour. House tour, when we have a lot of people coming to and from a set of 5 homes. And we have to control traffic and parking is considered a special event. Because it's happening not at a commercial facility, which is set up for that, it's happening at a
So is it something that attracts more than 10 parkers at a private home? 5 parkers, 10 parkers over half an hour, 10 parkers over an hour, 30 parkers over an hour? I mean, I think you could define what a large event or unusual traffic means. I just think. Do you have guidelines now? I mean, you require a permit. What's your permit guidelines?
Going to enforcement.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you just don't have it out.
Okay, that was a short statement.
Well, it is, but you don't.
Thank you, Laura.
Good.
You didn't drink your coffee.
I did finish my coffee.
We'll get another one, Laura, it's on us.
You might not make it these seconds.
We have.
We'll still need to get here, 13 of Pedro.
Hi, Bill.
I feel.
I do have, and I do appreciate Shannon's that there will be, and I spoke to her for 2 hours. And we went through all that.
We had great time.
We had a great.
But you forgot some stuff.
No, I told Shannon this morning, I've written lots and lots of regulations over the years and some. Well, 4 versions of the Clean Water Act that there's no parts of the United States, which is just torture. But usually when you write regulations, it does go through many, many iterations because you fix things, you see new things, and you see it with clarity, and so there's just more things. So what I've done is I've gone through it again, and fortunately or unfortunately, the red line version was in Word and is an open document.
Yes, sir.
That was in the announcement last week, and so I've embedded my comments in that directly. I didn't do recommendations for everything, Paul, so I'm gonna go back and put recommendations in there. I just noticed certain things. One of the issues that I've noticed in multiple places is we tend to have a lot of things that are aspirational, that are really not definable, such as how are you gonna enforce people single file on the bike on the roads? It's just not really something that you can do. I mean, there's people that just do it all the time. There's a lot of other things.
Is there something wrong with having aspirational items in your rules and regulations? It's a community association.
Correct, Paul, but this ties back in my mind to the amendment change for enforcement. You and I talked about it. We sat down and had a conversation, and one of the things that concerns me is the way that it's drafted. It's basically what I would call a strict liability statute. Meaning that you violate a rule, you're strictly liable for it. There's no show cause, there's no opportunity for a forum where you can discuss whether you're actually in violation or not, and it's dependent on whoever makes the decision whether to move forward here. As a result, everything that's in these rules and regulations, you're strictly liable for. I don't think that's a good way to enforce that,
So Bill,
especially when you put aspirational stuff in there.
could I ask a question about that specific item? So it's on page 7.
Okay.
What is the second reference?
Yeah, it's on page 7. It's under item B, leisure trails. Because I'm trying to get what he would recommend. So we're under KICA facilities and properties. B, leisure trails, and we're on number 5. And that's the one that he just referenced. So on leisure trails, pedestrians, bicyclists, skaters, and non-motorized scooters should.
Right,
So it's not a you must,
right.
it's a should, but how would you change that? If we wanted to include something that was aspirational, like, look, we really want you to do these things.
Well, it would make it very cumbersome. In an ideal world, you have a section of things that are not hardcore enforceable, but they're just the goals and aspirations of the community, which would mean a lot of changing how this is drafted. But it is correct. I mean, they put the green lines down there, but people still go where they want. My dog, bless his heart, he knows where he wants to walk, and I'm constantly going back and forth. But it's hard. There's other things, and you'll see when I share this with you, I've identified a lot, and I don't want to go through them all here and drive you all crazy, but I just worry that we have set the tone for a lot of enforcement items that somebody could enforce when they really, really shouldn't be enforcement items. They should be, this is what the community standards are.
So could you just say that? Could you just put, this is what in our community, this is what we ask you to do,
Right,
to be a polite trail user.
right.
So that it's not a enforceable rule, but I'm not a lawyer, obviously.
Isn't that what you should?
That's what I thought it meant.
That's what
See,
the
but
word
that's
should
the
be.
thing, because, you know, I walk along the trail and maybe 10 people out of 100 say on your right, and they pass you. A lot of times they don't, and all of a sudden, this car bike is there, and I can't hear on that side, so I don't even know something's coming.
But if there was an accident happen
Right,
and that person did not announce themselves, we should go, you know, you were involved in that, something, you should.
that's
put it
personal
on.
liability.
Hey, Phil, did you read the preamble to the rules and regulations on page 2, in my document, it's page 2?
Oh,
The purpose of these rules and regulations,
oh,
did you read that? Yes or no?
I find that question somewhat insulting.
Why? Well, okay, sorry, let me rephrase my question.
You know, I.
Let me rephrase my, Phil, give me a chance. Let me rephrase my question. Shannon crafted a preamble to the rules and regulations that I think are actually very nicely put and set the proper tone for what we're trying to accomplish here. Now, maybe the language isn't perfect, and maybe you have comments relative to the preamble that would be helpful. If so, please provide them. But I do think the preamble does say to the community, look here's what we're trying to accomplish here, to uphold the shared values that make our community a safe, harmonious, and welcoming place to live.
I don't have an issue with that, Paul.
Okay.
What I have an issue with is the way the amendment is drafted, it becomes strictly liable for everything that's in there. Everything that is written in there could be enforced by KICA or somebody and take down a very, very bad habit.
Could be.
Yes, it could be, but that's the point, is that the way, when you write enforcement regulation, you should make the ones enforceable that you really want to enforce, not all these other goals and aspirations. That's just my experience in 30 years of doing enforcement. But.
So would you
It's
cut
a
this,
confusing
cut this completely?
well, I'm sorry, say that again.
Number 5, under the leisure trails, would you cut that whole section just because it's aspirational?
Let me say this. What page is it?
Sorry, page 7, I copy,
Yes.
item 5, facilities, the leisure trail, number 5.
I would, I'm not sure I would cut things, but I think I would identify, maybe it's easier, I'll go back and look at it again to think of it this way, but I just don't want us to get in a situation where, you have all these rules, this HOAL, which we all have heard this term too many times. I've never read the book, but apparently it exists. That we're not trying, as Paul said, this is the vacation paradise, we're not trying to like overrule and overregulate everything.
Sure.
But we have so many things in here, who makes a decision if something's too loud? Or if dog barking's annoying? I mean, the town has a decibel statute, or ordinance, but that's related to leaf blowers, I think, and generators. But,
Noxious or offensive activity is my favorite from comments.
right, it's
Actually,
that
leaf
plastic
blowers are
import thing.
definitely-
I know pornography when I see it, but I can't tell you what it is. So let me scrub it again with that in mind.
Thank you.
One of the things, we've got this 20-page document.
Yes, sir.
It's nice to have it, we're codifying some certain rules. Nobody's gonna see this. Most of the people on the island are guests, renters, etc. So I remember in September of 22, we put things in the budget, for instance, leased trail sign, leased single file Kiawah. Okay, we don't have one of them in here. Okay, that was 2.5 years ago. So we can get this in perfect, but how do we get the aspirational things out there? Okay, I agree with you. Single file, please keep right. something like that, and then somebody riding down the left side, you know, fighting for that. I mean, it's kind of like most people want to obey certain rules. There are people that are never going to obey the rules. So these things will hopefully mitigate the issue, not going to eliminate the issue.
Correct.
And so however we word it here, it's going to have no impact on the family that shows up for a long week here, instead of that.
But, no, I think you're right, and there's many other things that the renters should be aware of that they aren't, and if you hand them a 20-page document, they're not gonna read that. What you need is a list of really important items for the renters to have, and I know there's been discussion of that, and
Well, that's where we produce the guest guide, so that it's got a map, which they will pick up, and it's got rules that are germane to a guest, to the island, whether they're a rental guest or a member guest.
right, exactly. It's
It would have to be updated based on whatever we do with this.
and there's been talk for a long time of them having, and there is some renter's book that I found at one point that I could never find again, that they're supposed to be using, and some people say they have it, and I don't know exactly where it is. But here's another point, and Shannon and I talked about it, in this document, we reference other rules and regulations, for lack of a better term, that aren't part of this. Now, one in particular, it was adopted by reference. So does that make it part of this document by terminology? To me, it does. Does that mean that will get filed then with this when it gets filed at the, down here? But there's other things in here we reference saying, you know, look at this, look at that. Are they part of this? Are they enforceable or not? I think we have to be clear on everything we cross-reference as to whether they're an enforceable item under these rules and regulations. Does that make sense?
Yep.
I know this is difficult, I mean, no question.
It's fun,
What?
it's fun. It's fun.
But anyway. I do have a lot of nitty comments, a lot of little things, just the nature of how I read things, rules. But what I told Shannon I was gonna do is go back into this red line version I've been working off of. It's easier to do that and fix some of the things and address some of these issues we just talked about. And then we'll share it with Shannon, and then from there, I don't know where it goes, but I do have.
Back to these findings.
Well, I was gonna say, is this the committee that's looking at this, or
No, it's the board of directors.
is the whole? One other quick thing I'll mention, and that is, and I shared with Shannon a paper I did for, I don't know how long it was, when Diane Mezzanotte was chair, that comparing KICA, TOKI, and ARB requirements for signs, for lights, for different things. And I found most of it is consistent. I found in some places there's a little overlap and inconsistency, and it would be, I think, a good exercise to make sure this document is consistent with what is required by others. Like the ARB, for example, all outdoor lighting must be approved as part of the landscape plan. I have a house across the street that has their landscape and lighting on 24 hours a day. All I can read in my living room because it's so bright. But it's landscape lighting. And is that allowed to be on all night? Well, the town rule says after 11 o'clock, only safety and walkway lights can be on when needed. Ours doesn't say anything about that. So I just think there's an opportunity here to try to make sure we're all enforcing the same thing so it's consistent.
Yeah, and so we worked intently to, if we were not the ones who were going to enforce it, with the exception of the list of 4 that Morris already pointed out. We didn't want to put it in, we weren't the enforceable authority. I know Amanda has helped already on this document in trying to clean up related to ARB and make sure that we're consistent. So,
Well, and on that note, the second set of items you have in that enforcement section, it doesn't define who actually enforces the. I don't know if it's so.
Page 16, your Kiawah property are primarily but not exclusively enforced by KICA's livability department. Is that what you were referencing?
Where's that?
It's on page 16. Says the enforcement of penalties for violations of section 3 of Kiawah property.
Oh, no, I was referring to what you were just mentioning before, where it mentions federal, state, and local law.
Yes.
And
Four,
then-
listed four.
And then right after that, there's another
Yeah.
group that doesn't have a definition of who enforces it.
Got it. So in that section, you would keep this.
Right. Anyway, well,
I thought,
thank you for your time. And, you know, what is the time frame here? I heard you extended this another week
for comments,
for comments.
yeah, so that we can produce, I have to produce for the board by that Wednesday, a new document. So I need comments by that Monday.
And you said you're gonna vote on the 10th, whatever that meeting is, I'm not sure.
That's the intent.
But without the amendment, as Moore pointed out, this is nice paper, but it's, excuse, not to be flip, but it's not worth the paper it's printed on because it's not enforced.
Appreciate your point of view.
Hey, Shannon, I mean, while I agree that we wouldn't have the enforceability to file a lien, haven't we gotten counsel in the past that say we do have the right to, the ability to fine?
Yes.
So we would be able to enforce these rules through a fine, but not enforce the fine through a lien.
Correct.
And should I ask for the ability to see that opinion? Because I don't think that's litigation related or even attorney-client privilege, because it's basically saying how you can apply the rules.
How old is that opinion, Shannon?
I don't remember. I'll have to pull it.
We'll have to pull that all up again, Phil. But the board has been operating for several years under the assumption, David may have better insight, but that we do have the ability to fine.
My attitude was to find people and they're paying it fine, but no fun intended, but I couldn't find anywhere where we had to find it.
And I've never found anything either, Kevin. So I think it's,
We'll pull it.
yeah,
Well, KICA said in 2018, on February 15th, there are a handful of instances where KICA options to enforce the covenants run out. There is no formal authority for the establishment of fines or a means to compel action. It's in your blog, I'll give it to you.
Okay. Just, if you give me what it is, I'll look it up.
Then, announcing the new covenant change anticipated for the vote this time, KICA said, in 2018, the membership voted to approve a covenant change that authorized KICA's ability to enforce violations for rules with fines, or in extreme cases, property liens. However, this covenant change was never formally recorded, so we're doing it again. So twice, KICA has said.
Yeah, I don't read that the same way. I mean, I think I agree the part about the fine, about the liens. But we'll pull it. I mean, it's guidance we got in the past and we can pull it out and Shannon can share it with the board one more time.
I'm telling you what you've represented to your community. That's all I'm saying, Kevin.
One of the things about that process, 2018,
I just want to look at
it
it.
really, the community and the board was not aware that it had not been recorded. Therefore, everybody's operating under that amendment as if it were enforceable. It was never enforceable. So whatever happened in 2018, it never happened. There was a vote, it got approved by the community, it didn't get recorded by the 10th of the next January. And everybody's wondering, why did they have the word in there that it's gotta be recorded by the 10th of the following January? The reason it's in there is many HOAs will come up with certain things and they make them effective January 1st of the next year, if they're on an annual lease. So therefore, if you want to make it effective on January 1st, you have to get that recorded, so they give you like 10 days,
right.
in case you missed it.
Right.
So if it's not recorded, it never existed, and that was the problem, because everybody was operating on the fact that that amendment was legit.
Well, and then if I recall during the bylaw governance task force, when we talked about this and looked into it, we could not figure out exactly which version was submitted to for recording. So that was the problem. We couldn't go back and fix the problem.
Right.
So, I don't really have anything else unless somebody has questions for me. Oh,
No, I don't.
all right, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
Should have done a Google search.
Folks
Yes,
online,
ma'am.
you've got two folks online who's been waiting, raise hand, wanna go down first?
Yeah, sure, go ahead, let's do one online, and we'll go to Bob in the room and just alternate that.
Okay, questions from Debbie Perlman, Debbie, you should be on mute.
Yep, thanks. You
Hi,
can hear me,
Debbie.
right? Hi, how are you? I'm glad that the personal mobility devices was brought up. That was my main thing to mention that motorized like wheelchairs should be excluded from that as but I also really didn't really understand that you had these electric devices designed for short distances. It seemed like some of these things could be for, you know, like a motorized, any of these could be for long distances, but that wasn't my issue. I just want to make sure that you'll be able to exclude motorized wheelchairs. I'm not quite sure. Actually, I was trying to think through this, what you would call it, because it's not always wheelchairs, but it could be a scooter, the type that you ride. If you are, if you're mobility impaired or unable to walk, that kind of thing. So I don't know whether motorized wheelchairs would cover all of it, but that I appreciate the that you were looking into that, that kind of an exclusion. I also wanted to mention the e-bike issue, and I know it's been mentioned in many other fora, but I just wanted to note that there's still, I believe, I think others have said that there should be a carve out for e-bikes for members who have disabilities that should be able to use those class 1 pedal assist tricycles or bicycles. They don't go very fast. In fact, there are without them, it's kind of a danger to be able to go across the street without having a small throttle that allows one to get above to cross the street. Otherwise, you're going backwards if you don't have the ability to press the pedal enough to be able to, you know, without any electric assist. There's no way to get across the street without going backwards or stopping right as you get to the top and being having to maybe be hit by a crossing vehicle. So I really would like that there would be for some sort of a carve out for pedal assist bikes for those who are otherwise challenged in some way. To please mention that. And I was I noted that you had this, and I think Maura had mentioned it, that you have this thing about the personal mobility devices at about 3 or 4 different places in here, just to make sure that you catch them all in section 5B and section 3A, and also in the definitions. So those are my two issues. And I thank Maura for bringing them up, and I think others have put them in written form. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much. That was it.
Yeah, the Humanities Committee has discussed the option of having a very small exception for people with disabilities to have pedal assist vehicles on the leisure trails. And maybe in that clause that talks about the motorized vehicles for the disabled, maybe we could include that in that clause, because it's the same type of exception that we're talking about.
Isn't it true, Sherry, wouldn't we be making the exception for individuals, not for the machines? So for example, if we said, if you're disabled or otherwise, you know, approved by KICA as having a special need, you can use really anything, a bike, a scooter, a wheelchair, whatever it may be. But, you know, I wouldn't want to approve, for instance, certain bikes and have younger kids in the family using them.
No, we absolutely would not want that. So yes, the individual property owner would need to get permitted by KICA somehow and be able to present that to security if asked. But we would also like to have the vehicle that they're using be inspected and permitted to, just to make sure that it is just pedal assist, not any other type class of e-bike.
So here's my problem with e-bikes. My concern is somewhat what both of you brought up was our ability to enforce anything. So until that's clarified in my mind, if we can't properly enforce then my concern is, one person sees one e-bike, everybody's gonna be. And then we have no ability to enforce it. If that's clarified, how we can enforce our rules, and I feel comfortable with that, then I would be willing to discuss exceptions to e-bikes. But personally, I just don't see the ability right now to do that. So gives me great pause and concern. I have no problem with electric wheelchairs or scooters or any of those what we call traditional mobility devices that we talk about. But when we start getting into e-bikes,
You have the same feeling
Uh,
related to the bicycles, like Debbie, because I've served on the committee with Sherry and Debbie specifically during the committee meeting talked about the trikes, not the e-bikes. Do you have?
when you say, is it an electric trike?
It's
an
a-
electric-
It's a
Yes,
pedal,
but it-
pedal assist trike.
Opposed to the regular e-bikes that most people see.
Again, I would like to clarify our ability to enforce.
Uh,
Right now, we have e-bikes, there are e-bikes, come out here, renters bring them in, there are some owners that have them. And we can't enforce it. So if we can't enforce it now, wouldn't it be better to allow some of the people that need them a way to legally operate them by name, by vehicle? I presented a whole way of doing this over 3 years ago, never had the votes. Didn't bring it up to a vote, because once you bring it up to a vote, you're gonna know you got a problem. But it was, we were debating a certain age, 65 or 70, 2 bikes per property, no rentals. The individual has to be, approved, the bike and the individual. You could get to the point you have to make the approved e-bike very visible to security that it's an approved e-bike. However that's done, and that e-bike will have a name on it, or 2 names on it. And security sees somebody riding that e-bike that should be riding it, and it says David Stefano on the e-bike, and my nephew's riding it, we lose the e-bike. It could be done, but right now, because we have an enforcement problem with e-bikes now, let's not go forward and allow people that really need it. We can do it, okay? Is that the fact that we allow some of our members to use it is not going to have any impact on enforceability, the problem we have now. It's just going to legitimize a few people. It's not going to be a lot of people. The only question is, you do it by age or medical condition or both. My guess is just about anybody on the island over 70 years old can get a doctor to sign a document for, I need an electric e-bike. Okay. So.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do we have I thought we had a policy relating to e-bikes. Is that not, that's
We have a
not the case?
prohibition.
We have a prohibition. So there is, we made a decision relative to e-bikes. And the decision is they're prohibited.
Yes.
Isn't there an exception? I thought there was an exception.
No, that's what we're trying to get.
okay, all right, well, I certainly agree with Debbie's point, and I believe there needs to be an exception on an individual basis for people who, either because of age or infirmity, have the ability to use a pedal assisted personal mobility device. I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing to do.
Well,
Hi, Bob.
hi, thank you, my name is Bob Marco, 103 Pleasant Valley. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comments. I submitted written comments to Shannon yesterday, not on the form, but and I don't want to go through all of them. I just want to highlight these just for right on e-bikes. I'm going to go right to that. I serve on the amenities committee with Sherry, and I want to second Debbie's thing and the comments made. Address some of the concerns about enforcement and stuff that David had highlighted. I think first of all, as someone said earlier, we can't regulate every risk. Our goal should be to maximize our ability of our members as they age or get impairments to enjoy the islands. By analogy, all the golf courses I've ever played at, when you get to a certain age, you can get a little flag to stick in your golf cart if you have a disability or you get to a certain age, that allows you to go a lot closer to greens, drive up to the tees, go off the cart paths on the par threes, so that you can continue to enjoy playing golf and not be constructively prevented from using that. The same should be provided here for e-bikes. As drafted, as Debbie pointed out in an earlier comment pointed out, you can't even use a motorized wheelchair to get to use the leisure trail. And so I think and making it, as David said, member specific, register, I believe the existing rules already have some grandfathered in things that are not allowed, that you have to register as member specific things. Follow that same path for exemption. If you have a handicap disability regardless of age, or you're above 70, 72, pick the number, and the member goes down to the office here or whatever. And then in terms of enforcement, it's very easy for security, if there's an issue, to see that decal or thing hanging off the back of the seat or on the handlebars or wherever you put it, that shows it's a registered e-bike. So if there's an e-bike out there that some renter brought on the island, easy to tell it's not listed. Or if a 13-year-old kid that looks otherwise healthy is riding some member's e-bike that was left in the garage, it's easy to figure out if that's a problem. And in terms of enforceability, well, it's going to make it more difficult to enforce. We have a rule in here that says pet owners must clean up after their pets. You're technically in violation of the rule. I walk bike paths and the boardwalks every day or ride bikes on every day. There's a violation of that rule. It's absolutely impossible to enforce unless somebody happens to see the action of somebody walking away from a pet who's just done their business. So, you know, we have all kinds of rules, as Kevin said, that, you know, practicality of enforcement is an issue every day. And in terms of risk, the other issue has been risk and talk about it in fishing. We operate 2 swimming pools without lifeguards. We take on all kinds of risks every day. We make a choice about what's the balance of cost and benefit, you know. And if you ever went to litigation and you had an accident at the pool and you were talking to somebody, they said, well, we have no life. We have 3 people standing around monitoring wristbands. You're going to look pretty silly in terms of what were your choices in terms of managing risk for that. So I think, you know, yes, there might be some infinitesimal, you know, thing, but as Debbie points out, or others point out, it actually may increase safety by allowing the pedal assist bikes, because someone can get across a pathway, they're heading back in the wind. And most importantly, and just if somebody's out there with their children or grandchildren and trying to enjoy a bike ride and they start having to head back into the wind or something, they can use a pedal assist bike to continue to enjoy it rather than having to lose an amenity they're otherwise been using for years. So on that, yes.
The amenities committee was not unanimous on this topic. We still understand the enforcement problem, and we do not want e-bikes to proliferate on the island. We are absolutely against e-bikes in general. But we're talking about a small number of people. Maybe you could count them on both hands, and we just really would like to accommodate them.
Sherry, I get it. I don't, and I'm not against that, but I think they will proliferate if we don't have an ability to enforce. And listen, it's only a conversation I'm hearing. It's an open topic about our ability to enforce. And I don't like putting security in that situation. So if I see e-bikes going by and I decide to get one of my 40-mile-an-hour e-bikes and go down the trail, what's security gonna do?
Yeah, no, well, we're talking about speed restricted e-bikes, whatever they're right.
Yeah, but we have the ability to enforce.
When it's like requiring it to be registered, by requiring it to be registered, the general rule is there. The general, then it fits under the current rule you already have prohibits.
And what is the current rule?
No e-bikes.
Right, but we have an enforcement issue.
Well, yeah, stock, that's the same language. No, stock has the same enforcement issue. If we have no ability to enforce every rule here is.
I'd like to make a comment. I do think we need to separate the broad challenge associated with enforcement from a discussion of personal mobility devices. I think they are related, but they are separate. I think it is within the board's purview to deal sensibly, Bob, as you have outlined and Debbie outlined, deal and, Sherry's comment. I think we're capable of dealing with this situation in a sensible, humane manner that is consistent with the preamble to our rules and regulations, and my intent would be that we would do that.
No, I totally agree with you, but, and you're absolutely right, the whole enforcement issue is applied to every single hour or plus in here, you know, that we have an, you know, and if we have enforcement authority, we have enforcement, if we don't, and that is the challenge of these rules, you know, most times you're writing rules and rules are either prohibitory and directly preventing you from doing something or directing that you must do something. Here we try to blend in community guidelines a little bit, and maybe we should put that in a separate document, something.
You're trying to, you're a community.
Right, I mean, you're a government entity.
Everything about
you say, you know, you have your HOA, but you have regulatory interactions, certain things. And like, I've drafted rules and enforced rules and stuff all my career, but that it is a challenge. But when you put guidance or other things in there and the preamble or other places are, but when you are doing things you want to be able to enforce, then you need to do that. I'll just make 2 or 3 other little comments unrelated to e-bikes. Is on the enforcement provisions, I put some detailed comments in there, but there's some terms of art used in section 2, about KICA purchase properties and KICA common properties. But when you go to the enforcement matrix, it says KICA properties. In theory, as drafted, enforcement action can prohibit somebody from getting to their, using the roadway to get to their own home.
Right, and that's forbidden by the covenants.
I don't think you can do that. So at least. Yeah, and just maybe putting those definitions up in the definitions section.
Got it.
And so that was the main other thing, I had in there, and then I've got some comments in there on the appeal rights and the hearing process and how that should work more effectively and what's clear, and providing people the opportunity to hear it. But that's, unless everybody has a question.
Thank you. I just want to make another comment on e-bikes. That, at least 4 years ago, if not 5 years ago, they were selling e-bikes up at the bike shop. And they had pedal assist 250-watt e-bikes, that's the basic pedal assist low power. I went up, I grew up and ride one. I went up and I talked to the owner who was just told and they don't have the e-bikes there anymore. And he let me ride. And one of the big issues at the time was that they go up to 20 miles an hour. Well, when you're going 19 miles an hour, you get very, very little juice. So I went out there and I got on that e-bike. I'm a pretty healthy guy, and this was 5 years ago. And I couldn't get that thing over 15 miles an hour if I tried. And I got it up to 15 and I was dying, okay? So I used one in Europe. I was on a river cruise. I took a tour with pedal assist e-bike, beautiful bikes. We never got over 10 miles an hour. And it was fun. So we never brought it up to a vote because of this 20-mile-an-hour thing. You can't get it. There is a person in this room that can get a pedal assist e-bike probably over 12, 13 miles an hour because you lose the juice the faster you go. But when you're starting off across the road or whatever it is, the greatest thing to slice bread because it's easy. So that was the big, I made arrangements for every board member to go up there and test drive the 250-watt pedal assist e-bike. Not one board member took me up on it. They just know they go 20 miles. They don't.
Dave, what was your recommendation? Dave? Were you making a recommendation?
Right now,
Yeah.
my recommendation's been up there for 5 years.
Oh,
70 years old on medical condition, 250-watt pedal assist e-bike.
great.
We still have 2 commenters online. Ellen, go ahead.
Our next commenter is Todd Bonet. Should be unmuted.
Hi, Todd Bonet, 3532 Shipwatch. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Hey, I don't want to belabor this point, but Kevin, I think you made a good point is, authorize the user, not the, the bike or something. But I think somebody has special needs should have clarity because I know there's a lot of confusion right now. So I don't see why KICA couldn't adopt a policy that, once KICA approves a particular individual with a particular, piece of equipment, then I think that special needs person should have clarity. If we could turn to traffic and parking, section 3, 2 questions here. With regard to RVs, I realize this is pretty much the same language we had before. I guess I'm asking for a slight accommodation, to allow, an RV, and this might apply to boats as well, to be in a parking lot, or I guess in a driveway for a certain number of days. And I'll give you kind of a practical example. We have a Airstream RV that's built on a Sprinter platform, so it looks no different than what the resort and the club uses. If we go out to a concert or something, and we're tailgating, the typical routine would be we would get the vehicle the night before, load it, charge the battery, go to the event, come back. The second night it would be there, and then the third day we would take it back to where it was being stored. So I guess I'm suggesting here that there might be an accommodation for allowing a certain number of days. This would probably apply to a boat as well. Again, I'm not a boat owner, but I've had friends that have had boats that, as people say, the best type of boat to have, where you take it out, you bring it back, you probably clean it, and then you take it back to storage. So, asking for an accommodation here for a certain number of days, 2 or 3 days. Second thing is, this language restricts it to a residential property. And I guess my question is, for commercial properties, what are the rules and regs affecting commercial properties? And I'll give you an example. We live on West Beach off of Shipwatch. Just behind us is the parking lot that the resort uses to store their vans. Again, I realize that there are operational issues, that they start early, they end up late. You've got, vans backing into spaces, so you get the backup noises. But the other thing is they use it for what I call some light maintenance. They detail it there. They wash it because there's no power. Because there's no power, they end up having to bring a generator in. So you've got both the generator noise as well as the power washing. So I guess my question is, what are the rules and regs that affect commercial properties? Are there any?
Well, the commercial properties have to follow a lot of these, but related to like the Sprinter type vans, the commercial properties are accepted because this is specifically for the residential properties.
Yeah, and again, I guess I'm just asking in general, what are the restrictions? Like I say, as I read this, there are no restrictions on commercial properties in here. This all deals with residential property. And I didn't know if there was something separate, whether it was formal or informal. So I guess, I'm just asking whether or not we need to formalize and have clarity around what the rules and regs are for commercial properties. Next point is, if we go to the definition of members, which is page 1. If you look at the definition in 3 in the whole, it includes a director, officer, or manager. When I think about use of the island, I think about use of the island by owners of property. With this language, you could have somebody who is not an owner of a property be a member. And if you look at the way the language is structured, you have kind of a cascading effect. You have a type A member reference here. You have members referenced. And then if you look at the definition of member guest, a member guest is a guest of a member. So I'm just wondering whether or not 3 in the whole is too broad, because isn't the understanding that, the common areas are for the use of owners of the property and their guests? I think that's the intent. So I would take a look at that language, because I think it's probably been there in the past, but I think it's probably too broad as we're looking at it. And I know we've, yes.
Got it. I'll look
Okay.
at it.
Okay.
The other part of that, and our covenants refer to people that have the right of easement of a member. That includes the spouse and the children, meaning dependent children.
Right.
As a member. So I think we have to include the spouse and dependent children in the
Agreed.
definition of a member.
Agreed, and we might, it kind of gets to a concept of maybe lack of better term, beneficial ownership and the right, the like, but I just think as we look at this, and I'll kind of get to why I focused on this language is, you know, in the skiescape regime, we are coming up on our second Picasso ownership. So when we look in it's section 5, access and use, I guess the question I've got here is, the intent is that every owner, or I guess every fractional owner of the entity, of the property should have use to it. And I guess the question I've got reading this is, I think that works, Shannon, but I don't know if you've looked at this in the context of an increasing number of fractional ownership interest.
So from KICA's perspective as it stands now, if you are a fractional owner, you are an owner. You are fractional owner in an LLC, or you are a fractional owner of that specific property by deed, you are a fractional owner, you are treated as a member of the association.
Right.
However, something like a Vicasa, there's been several of them, I can't think of the names off the top of my head, where vacation clubs come in and they own properties. Those are not considered members under KICA's rules, and we specifically call them out in the definition of renter. That's how KICA treats them.
Okay, so Picasso, an owner of a Picasso unit is not deemed to be a member?
Correct.
Okay, okay.
No, wait a minute, let me make sure I got that correctly. If you, Todd, are the owner of the unit and you put it into a Vicasa program, you, Todd, are permitted to use our facilities as a member. However, if it's Vicasa that owns the home directly, then everybody who's coming through that does not have the rights of a member.
Okay.
Did that make sense?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. And, you know, staying in section 5, looking at clause 2, the second sentence, use of KICA common properties by unauthorized persons. I guess I've got a general question here for the attorneys in the room is, are we better off keeping that general, or do we need to be a bit more specific when we talk about people coming to the island from Andale West? You know, we have, you know, other people coming off the island, you know, we've got Orange Hill. So I guess the question for the attorneys to consider here is whether or not we want to keep it general, an undefined term, unauthorized persons, or if we need to be a bit more specific, you know, whether that's an IE or an EG.
So I can give you some context about why this is here. Now, what the attorneys in the room say. He's on page 7. He's under KICA facilities and properties, which is number 5. And then he's under A2. And it says KICA common properties, the roads, the trails, the boardwalk, are for the exclusive use of KICA members and their authorized guests. Use of KICA common properties by unauthorized persons is strictly prohibited and then shall be deemed trespassing, including those unauthorized persons entering KICA property on foot or by bike. So this is specifically from our attorneys, this type of language, so that KICA can take the step to trespass people who do not belong, legally trespass people who do not belong from Kiawah Island, which we do. If you do not belong here and you have no right to be here and you came into the property in an unauthorized manner, then we will go through the process with Charleston County Sheriff's Office to formally trespass you from the property. Right.
Okay.
That's what that's there for and why it's written very broadly. Now, there's an attorney at the podium, so here goes it.
Anybody in this room is an attorney but myself, but
I know.
the only question I have on that, and I have it in my notes, was that when you say authorized guests, do we mean renters or authorized guests and the folks that all fall under it because they have use of leisure trails?
Yes.
And I think that's what you're trying to get at, but.
The resort is a member.
Right.
So their authorized guests are included within that they have the right to use of common property.
Right.
It's people that are trying to get onto Kiawah Island without being authorized by some member of uses.
And, you know, part of it, and again, I apologize, I just picked this up late last night, but part of it is when we look at this section A and five, I guess, section 5, paragraph A, is section 1 talks about KICA restricted common properties. We talk about type A members in clause 1, or in the preamble to clause 1. And then when we get to A, B, and C, and then 2, we talk about members. And then when we get to section 2, we reference KICA common properties, which I assume is supposed to be, I don't know, there's a difference between restricted common properties and common properties. Do you see where I'm going? Section 2 references KICA common properties. So I don't know if there's a distinction between that and restricted common properties up above. So,
Thank you.
yeah, but so just to recap, you know, on my RV, you couldn't tell any, there's no difference between what I have versus what the resort uses. The only way you can tell the difference is it's got an Airstream marking on it. I do agree that we don't want RVs parked on the island. You know, we could talk about restricting certain types. I think that's probably overkill. You know, we're all good neighbors on the island. I guess the only thing I'm asking for here is some permission for some accommodation for 2 or 3 days so that I am not violating the, you know, the covenants. Second thing is to, you know, have a better understanding as to what the rules and regs are with regard to the commercial properties, i.e. the resort, for example. And again, I think, you know, the resort and Roger are good stewards on the island. I'm not trying to, you know, create an issue here. I'm just trying to understand what those rules and regs are as it relates to the resort and others. Take a look at the definition of members, in particular 3 in the whole. I think it is probably too broad. We want to narrow this to ownership. And then Shannon, I think I understand what the rules are with regard to Picasso. I may follow up with you individually on that. That's a kind of a bigger issue for our regime and other regimes on the island. Thank you.
So Todd, I had a question for you on the issue of RVs. Are you saying that KICA should be amenable to a member's use of an RV and the member has the responsibility to let KICA know? Or are you saying we should actually try to draft something in rules and regulations?
Yeah, I think we should allow some accommodation for 2 or 3 days. You know, again, we already have rules on what you can do, you know, permanently in terms of storage. All I'm asking for is here the practical logistics of if I'm going to use my RV for tailgating, the reality is what I'm going to do is the day before I'm going to load it up with food and beverage, probably charge.
I know, but I'm asking a specific question. Is the burden on the member to call Livability or Shannon or somebody and say, look at, you know, a special event, I'm going to have an RV on my property, so that when the neighbors complain, we can say, look at, we understand, but we've given them, you know, the weekend or whatever. Where's the burden of proof?
Yeah, I guess I'm just asking for a general allowance. You know, if it has to be approved beforehand, that's fine. But, you know, do we really want KICA having to approve that? Because again, quite frankly, you know, this allows, you know, for example, you know, there in the Seascape regime, I have a fellow owner who has it has an Airstream passenger van that looks no different than, you know, what the resort has. He parks it there and that's allowed. His vehicle is literally no different than mine. You know, there might be a little bit of weight difference, but there can't be that much weight difference because the engine and the drivetrain is the same between the RV vehicles and the passenger van vehicles. So I guess I'm just asking for an accommodation, whether or not it needs to be pre-approved. You know, we can discuss whether or not, you know, KICA needs to be involved in that, as opposed to, you know, what I'll call enforcement by the neighbors, which is realistically what would happen is that it's a nuisance to the neighbors and they would call and say that Todd's had the RV there for 5 days or a week.
It's almost having to do it for security purposes for patrol. You have to do it where the member was notified KICA, because otherwise security patrol is out there and they don't know that you have it, that you've been approved for it, that it's gonna be gone tomorrow. And that you're not sleeping in it, right? Because we don't want it as accommodation.
No, and I'll just add on this, I'm a hard no on RVs and boats and driveways on Kiawah and private neighborhoods. If some regime wants to have a RV boat section in their regime, and that's great for them. But, we have beautiful homes, beautiful properties, high value on our properties. When I drive through a neighborhood anywhere and I see boats and RVs in the driveways, it just brings a certain connotation to me about the neighborhood.
Yeah, and Dwayne, I agree. I mean, we wouldn't want a Prevost bus parked for an extended period of time. But, you know, I'll get back to my earlier point. There is no difference between my Airstream RV and what the resort uses. But we allow the resort to park their vans just right behind.
In commercial areas, in commercial lot, not in private neighborhoods.
But that's my question. What are the rules and regs with regard to commercial properties?
Call the resort, maybe they'll let you park it there, I don't know.
No, but I'm asking, what are the rules and regs with regard to commercial properties? We have none, do we?
No, the commercial properties have to follow the rules and regs as written by the board of directors unless they're accepted from something like this specific rule they are currently accepted.
Okay, so what are the rules and regs with regard to their vans being parked across the island? Are there any?
Their vans are accepted because they're in commercial properties, not in residential.
Yeah, and again, I'm just asking them, what are the rules and regs with regard to commercial properties? We don't have any yet.
Well, I think what Shannon was saying was that the rules and regs that are drafted here apply to all members.
But in this particular section, we've carved out and narrowed it to just residential.
There's no prohibition on their vans.
Okay,
Correct.
and is that something for discussion or not?
Certainly the board can discuss what they want to do about sprinters and that type of vehicle. And that's on my list here for the board of directors.
Okay.
I think that's honestly, I think that's a non-problem. I don't know what other people feel, but.
Well, I mean, you know, again, I think the resort and Roger are good stewards, but if you live on that section of West Beach, you know, you can't help but deal with the fact that, you know, you've got vans coming all day of the morning and the night. Which is the reality. That's just the operational reality. But they're also using it for, you know, what we'll call light maintenance and upkeep. And, you know, that's why I'm asking a question. So, okay, thank you.
You're welcome, Todd. Did you have another?
We do, Ginny Bush. Ginny, you should be unmuted.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, can.
I am calling from out of the country and have had a hard time hearing the discussion in the room, although the call-in callers come in clearly. I want to return to the e-bike and motorized scooter issue. I'm growing impatient, frankly, with this hang up about enforceability. If you look through these rules, there are a number that are difficult to enforce. And in fact, in some cases, the rules and regs use precatory words like you should, or, you know, we recommend. I think it is quite simple in the definition of recreational vehicle to add a provided however clause that in effect exempts motorized, recreational vehicles such as e-bikes, e-trikes, wheelchairs, scooters that have been permitted by KICA by owners who document age or physical limitations on their abilities. Have day glow orange stickers, decals, or a little flag put on those vehicles. I think that would make it abundantly clear to anyone who wanted to enforce, or any member who wanted to make what is equivalent to a citizen's arrest, that that is a permitted vehicle. End of story. This is an ADA requirement, I think, arguably, because there are public access areas on the island, plenty of them, marathons, special races, special events. So I think ADA does apply, but even if it does not, I think it is callous and, unbelievably unconscionable of KICA to not explicitly make it possible for someone with a disability to use these devices. And I don't really care about enforceability. I'd never see any enforcement on leisure trails in the first place. So, but I think a decal or a pennant or a little flag solves that problem. And one definitional change for recreational vehicles would simplify the rules and regs to exempt those members who apply and get a permit. End of story.
Thank you, Jenny, and I shared, you sent written feedback to us as well, and I shared that with the board.
Thank you, Shannon.
You're welcome, ma'am. Any others? No, ma'am. Any more in the room? No. Yeah.
I brought this up before, this whole visit to the home,
Yes, sir.
where A1 says when conducting, it's an exception, this is allowed, when conducting business exclusively by remote means, such as telephone, PDA, fax, computer, US mail, et cetera, et cetera. And then you go down to E, it's remote, you can operate a business that's remote, and then E says, but you gotta have all three options. I think that if people are coming to your house, you're a business. And I don't think that should be allowed. And one of the ways to look at it, if you're conducting an activity that requires a business license in the town, you can't do it in your house. It's self-contradictory, you can do business remotely in your house, but you gotta have market trade.
So your change would be that business in the home draws no outside visitors to the home.
I would just eliminate E.
What did we say?
I don't know. What did he say?
So on page 9, under number 8, business in a home. Earlier it talks about the board of directors understands that businesses prefer in a home now because of these technologies. And this is talking about how business in a home cannot disturb the residential character of the island. So item E says adequate off-street driveway parking and or extra garage space must be available to applicable residents to accommodate cars coming to the subject residence for business purposes. Such vehicles may not be parked on the street. So maybe
I guess Shannon, sorry to interrupt you. But I think there is another principle here, and that is we don't want to interdict private activity of our homeowners, unless that activity is abusive or smelly or noisy or infringing upon the common weal. So if somebody is a psychiatrist and he or she has clients who come for therapy and park in the owner's driveway, why do we care?
how is it different than your daughter coming to parking?
Yeah, like, really, we have to enforce that? It's like fishing on bridges and steroids.
So then you would agree that E could be eliminated?
No.
No,
They would follow our parking.
no, I don't think you can have a conference you know, where there's overflow parking, et cetera. But if someone is a consultant and, or, a massage therapist or a yoga instructor, and a person comes to his or her home, what's the harm in that?
Or if your neighbor's a decorator or one of
Right.
a million things.
Tax advisor.
Well, I mean, then you've got a problem with the town, because if you're an attorney, if you're a psychiatrist, if you're painting nails, you're gonna get a business like. My point is that you're gonna pay a VAT tax, all of that stuff, okay? I don't think,
We have enough problems with the stuff that we can control.
okay, I could theoretically do this. I could go next year, take the South Carolina bottles in, which I'll probably pass, and open up my home at my house. That's ridiculous.
Why?
Why is it ridiculous? I mean, who knows? I could be running arbitration to my living room. You're not gonna, if you're gonna operate, if you wanna be in business, if you wanna be a psychiatrist, if you wanna be a nail painter or whatever it is, go and rent some space or Freshfield or whatever it is to run a business. You're not gonna operate businesses in your home. You know, it's just,
Well,
I mean, that's why that whole thing is there, remotely only. You're not gonna, what are you gonna do when you're a psychiatrist? You're gonna call it a pass for your patient that's coming in?
So David, let me give you a real life example. There's a person, a neighbor, I assume she's a member, I don't know. She bakes cookies or croissants or something. And she communicates to the Kiawah community and Kiawah and says, look, I just made all these cookies, you know, and they're for sale. Now, are you suggesting that we go out there and say, no, you can't do it?
you can't do that if you have a lot of people showing up.
Are you a person?
No.
But I make these cookies, okay? I think there's the difference between, I'm a psychiatrist and I can work remotely and I'm sitting in my living room and I have 7 clients who come every day, in and out, in and out, in and out.
Electronic.
No, you come to my home for treatment, okay? A real business being run out of your home day in and day out, or 3 days a week, or whatever. I think that's different on the neighborhood. Then, for example, we know people who the husband, his avocation is woodwork. And they have big wood workshops in their basements. And they make things. And sometimes they sell them. Maybe every art and artisan, they put together all their things and they sell them there. They don't sell them out of their house, but they prepare them in their house. It's different.
Our painters, our photographers.
They're an art and artisan and they do all their work and then they put them out for sale. That's different to me than day in and day out, 2 or 3 times a week. There's a steady stream of people coming in and out the neighborhood. Houses have to be called in potentially. It's a little different. I think on the
I agree
neighborhood.
with you, it's a little different.
And I think that's correct here, because the trade business or activity must not diminish the residential private character of the island, that's B. It's just talking about the parking, we just have to say that if you have.
But how do you
They must follow our.
But you gotta stop off at the top where it says exclusively remote. Exclusively remote, that's all that's allowed. Period.
No.
I agree with your observation, it is different. It is different, the occasional versus the everyday, I agree with you. But what about the cookie lady? Do I shut her down?
Or a part-time tax professional, has 2 or 3 people stop by every week.
Where is the problem we're trying to solve here?
Does the cookie lady have a town business license?
I don't care.
Well,
I don't
my
care.
point is you have to obey all.
And they're good cookies.
That's an order.
Hey, I'll put forward, I think we would only solve this through a vote. I think this is the sort of thing where Shannon will put out the rules and we'll have, someone can propose an amendment. We can vote the amendment through or not. Clearly, we're sitting on different sides of the aisle. I don't know if you'll solve it today without a formal vote.
Well, but I think you can protect against the extreme of the person regularly running a business out of your home with complaint.
But the language that Jerry cited seems to do that.
I don't think it does.
Well, maybe it's not perfect, but
Okay,
give us the perfect language.
okay. All right. I'll give you some language.
Thank you.
Would you send it to me?
I would be happy.
Thank you. Anyone else in the room or online? No one online? No one online. All right. Thank you, everybody. I know this is a lot of fun and you spent, an hour and a half of your day doing this, a little over your day, but I appreciate it. If we can get a better document for the community, that's the goal.
And again, I do appreciate the people who have sent us comments in writing, because that's particularly helpful for us to digest and think about it.
Yeah. Thank you kindly, and I'll have a good day.